All right. Welcome, everybody. God, these mics are working. Well, we've got a few new people around the table. So why don't we just do some quick introductions. Need to warn you, to those of you who need a warning, that you are on the camera. This is our Help Everyone in Salt Lake City Sleep effort through SLC TV. We think it's really helpful for community members to be able to see what's going on in terms of what's happening in our neighborhood councils and neighborhood organizations. And so we've been filming these and putting them on. And I'm not sure when. Do you have any idea when they're on?
I'm not sure when they're getting for, but I know they run quite a bit.
Prime time. This will be prime time. Anyway, thank you all for joining us and for your service. We're going to get into the agenda, but first, why don't we just quickly go around, because we've got, I think, quite a few people here who are new chairs, in some cases returning chairs, I can tell. So,
Lynn Pershing, Yale Crest Neighborhood Council.
Theodore Cowan, Vice Chair, Central City.
Michael Iverson, Chair, Central City.
Jade Sarver, Treasurer, Fair Park.
Valerie Vaughn, Chair of Liberty Wells.
Dave Alderman, Chair, Greater Avenues.
Cal Noyce, Vice Chair, Jordan Meadows.
Michael Dodd, Chair of Wasatch Hollow.
Laurel Young, Chair of Foothill Sunnyside.
Laura, you just can't get enough, huh?
I know.
Thank you.
Daryl High, Chair, East Liberty Park.
Judy Short, I'm not Chair of Sugar House.
Dan Strong, also not a chair, Rose Park.
I'm Mike Ely, the outgoing chair of Sunnyside East.
Matt Nelson, the recently conscripted and incoming chair of Sunnyside East.
No, wait a minute. It was a hard-fought election.
It was.
Yeah.
David Castile, Vice Chair of West Point Community Council.
Aaron, thanks. Let's get our folks from the city.
Dennis Ferris, Vice Chair, Poplar Grove.
Oh, you should come on up. You guys should come on up. We'll make room.
Andrew Johnson, Admiral Chair, Poplar Grove.
And, of course, new city council representatives. Congratulations.
Austin Rigby, I'm an intern for the mayor's office.
Rocio Soto, I'm treasurer for downtown.
Clayton Scrivener, Civic Engagement Manager, Salt Lake City.
I feel compelled to stand up. I'm Mary Delamere Schaefer. Hi. I'm with Community and Economic Development.
Karen Hale, the mayor's office.
Sarah, that's you. You can introduce
Chair Lyman, and I do the social media in the mayor's office. That's what I was getting.
Hi, I'm Chelsea. I'm the Refugee Liaison for the mayor's office.
Pina Kumar, mayor's office.
Sean McDonough, mayor's office, community liaison.
Michael Scott, Community Liaison.
Esther Hunter, East Central Community Council.
So our community council members, we can squeeze together more, and let's have you up here at the. Let's have you up here at the table. So we've got a brief presentation, but I think before we do that, while we have all of our staff here, since this will be the last meeting we have with this staff, that will be largely probably reconstituted with the new mayor. You know, I think we should recognize them with a big thank you applause. They've been amazing. We've been having, as you can imagine, a lot of bittersweet moments here in the office for the last couple of months. But we're going to bring you up to date on what's been happening with our homeless site facilities commission. And let me just put this in context. Mary's going to present that to you. But I think all of us are well aware, and I know in some of your neighborhoods you've experienced the effects of our homeless population. I have been working on this issue from my first weeks in office. I started meeting quarterly with the providers who provide homeless services, both governmental and non-governmental. And we have worked through a whole variety of things over the years, but a few years ago, conditions really started to worsen, and the problems really started to escalate. And we tried a whole series of different measures. And I would say that, while we certainly saw some progress in some respects, we did not see overall progress. In fact, I think we really believed and understood that the problems in some respects were getting worse for a whole variety of reasons I won't get into, and in a whole variety of ways. About a year and a half ago, we decided we had to take a whole new comprehensive look with everybody involved in the homelessness world, which included the homeless providers, their funders, included all of the governmental entities, city and county, and it included the Downtown Alliance, for example, was well represented. Excuse me, the Downtown Community Council was well represented, and others. And we sat down with, so the city, of course, is the host for the vast majority of those facilities. The county plays the lead role in providing the services. A lot of the funding and a lot of the service provision comes through the county directly or indirectly. So Mayor McAdams and I, a little over a year ago, concluded that the best way to really address comprehensively our homeless conditions and the effects on the community comprehensively was to actually develop a comprehensive parallel approach. Have the county focus on services, the city focus on facilities. I asked Palmer DePaulis and Gail Miller to co-chair an effort that included all of the various folks who have a specific interest, and I think we had, I'm thinking 25 to 30 people. We kept trying to narrow the numbers down, and they kept growing. And but we went through over the last year, and I'm going to turn the time over to Mary to describe kind of where we are here and what's transpired. An intensive ongoing effort, and both of the commissions, the county around services and the city around facilities, worked incredibly hard through that year. And Gail Miller and Palmer DePaulis put in personally hundreds of hours of donated time. As they both said when I asked them if they would co-chair our efforts, and they were a little bit reluctant, they both said, you know what, if we're going to do this, we don't want to be figureheads, we're going to really get involved. And they more than lived up to that responsibility. And along the way, we, per our plan, merged the county and the city's effort. So that we would have an approach that reflected what our service needs are and the facilities to address those services and take into account our community and how we could best handle homelessness. I'll also say this was obviously a hot topic in the course of an election year, but I'll say that it's amazing in a way. We are troubled as every metropolitan area across the country has had incredibly difficult times around homelessness. In fact, 2 cities in the last 3 months, Los Angeles and Seattle, have declared states of emergency around their homeless populations. That Salt Lake City is renowned for being the model for addressing homelessness, which is odd for us, right? Because what we see are the problems associated with homelessness. And the reason we're well known, as some of you know, I think, is because we took on, before I came into office, homelessness with a direct approach, which is to provide housing for the homeless, called the Housing First model. And we were quite successful with that. And then President Obama, really led by Michelle Obama, and the Vice President, led by Joe Biden, launched a challenge for cities to eliminate chronic homelessness for veterans, and doubled down on federal resources to help cities do that. And Salt Lake City and Phoenix were identified as two cities that would challenge each other to see who could eliminate veterans homelessness the first with that increased attention. And we tied. We actually got it done in a period of about 3 months. And so we knew we had a model for the chronically homeless that works. And has, as I said, it's sort of gotten an enormous amount of national attention because of that. We also, though, knew that that wasn't the end, was barely the beginning of addressing homelessness, because what's happened in the recession and the aftermath of the recession is our homeless population has completely changed. The number of people who lost their jobs and lost housing, or had health problems, or were facing abuse in their homes, or kids who were thrust out on the streets, those populations we actually identified in the course of this work, 9 subpopulations. Those populations exploded and created a whole new set of circumstances for us to address. And then it was compounded, and this has been true across the country as well, by the drug dealing world embedding themselves in the homeless population as a shield for their illegal activities. And it just wreaked havoc for us, as I said, as it really did for all the cities. But we have just completed our work. We actually have one more meeting, but we have effectively arrived at an approach and set up, I think, a path forward that everyone is confident can be and will be successful in Salt Lake City, and enable us to over the next, I think our estimate is, if things go decently, over the next 3 to 5 years, to really change the whole face, not just of homelessness, but in terms of the impacts on the community. So I've probably said too much, Mary, but Mary and an incredible team of people have been working on this. Elizabeth Bueller isn't here, I know, but we hired a full-time homeless services coordinator. We also hired some consulting staff. Many of you know Bill Evans. He had just retired from a position he had held, and he came on board to help us. And then we dedicated a large staffing effort throughout city government to help us work through these issues and be successful. Everything from our police department to planning to housing services and the like. So Mary, I'm going to just turn the time over to you. I've probably spent too much time on this, but wanted to provide context for the outcomes.
That's excellent context. Thank you, Mayor. So last year, when the mayor appointed a commission on the Homeless Services Site Evaluation Commission, the name that no one can remember. The important piece was that the city would have a group that would be responsible for the geography. Where does the facility belong? And how does it belong and fit in a neighborhood? And that was what was critical to us, obviously, from a city perspective. And like the mayor recapped, at the same time, the county started working on what they call their collective impact, where collectively a group of folks were getting together to talk about services and how they could have collective goals so that they could then ensure that all the monies that were coming through city, state, federal government could all, and private dollars, could all be funneled towards an agreed upon set of goals. So the county has accomplished that. And the beauty of these two processes, people thought we were a little nuts to do this, but we knew that neither of those could be accomplished if they weren't concentrated. And it made sense to us at the outset, and now that it worked, it really makes sense to us, that they happen in a parallel fashion. So many of the people that sat on the county group also sat on the city group, so there was a good cross discussion. So I have to say that this is one of the most rewarding processes of my career. Many times when we go into work with a group of community members, While we don't like to admit it, we kind of have some ideas where we think we might end up, and we hope you all get there. I can honestly say we didn't have a good idea of what we were going to do. And every time as staff we would get to a preparation meeting with Gail Miller and Palmer DePaulis, we'd get a little freaked out because we'd think we don't know what's going to happen after this next step. And we really didn't. So our mantra became one step at a time. And I think commissioners would say the same thing. And I think that when we started, we had 30 people who had very distinct ideas about what should happen around homelessness. I always say now, if you say, why doesn't somebody just do something about homeless issues, that means you're new to the issue. Because it's so complex and difficult that one single fix is not the answer. And we certainly explored that as a commission. If we have this diverse population that the mayor talked about, how do we meet the needs of a diverse population? So at one point, the commission looked at a pie chart that talked about on any given night at the road home, and they picked a certain night. They said who was there and sort of what's the group that they represent. So there were so many parents with small children. There were so many single men, so many single women, so many people that needed behavioral health support, so many people that needed substance abuse support, so many people that were domestic violence victims. And as we looked at that data as a commission, so we would meet in these commission meetings, and then in between them, Gail and Palmer and staff, we would meet with small groups of commissioners, whoever could come at that time, and sort of vet our issues and concerns about what to do. So the direction for the commission is, should the road home stay where it currently is, as it is currently configured? Should the road home should the road home stay where it is and be reconfigured and be adapted, or should the road home go somewhere else? And that was the focus of the purpose of the commission. So we had what I think was, for me, it was historic and rewarding meeting at our last meeting where we had our 30 commissioners stand up and say, were they in on the recommendation? Were they out? Did they have issues? And our commissioners, all 30 of them said, we're in on the recommendation. So I'll cut to the chase.
There was one sideways.
There was one sideways, and his sideways was because he worked for a nonprofit and he wasn't sure how he fit in the recommendation that was being made for these other entities that were receiving public monies. So he ran up to tell us afterwards, I'm not out. I don't want you to think I'm out. So what they came down to is we said, should the facilities be centralized? Should we have a campus like we have sort of informally now, where all the services happen in one place and you only have to go to one spot to get everything you need? And that was debated long and hard. We went on field trips, we looked at case studies, we looked at what other cities are doing that's successful or not successful on all of these fronts. The second model we looked at is, should they be scattered? Should there be smaller facilities based on needs of the groups that are tailored, that have services on site? So instead of going one place to eat, or one place to get case management, or someplace else to sleep, that it could all be consolidated? Or should there be some combination where it's a scattered facility approach and some centralized services? So the unanimous consensus of the group was that we should have scattered facilities, and it was based on this data that I just talked to and that the mayor has referred to, is that the only way out of homelessness is to treat individuals as individuals and treat them with their current needs and their current circumstance in the most humane and healing environment possible. And that could not happen where there are 1,000 people in one spot trying to get a bed every night, which is what we have down at Rio Grande right now. And the Rio Grande folks told us, both Catholic Community Services that serves food down at St. Vincent's and does the day services, and the Rio Grande, the road home folks said, the numbers are overwhelming to us. You know, we have to worry about safety and security, number one. And that's so overwhelming that it's difficult, although we're trying, to get to meeting the individual needs. So for a minute, revel with me on that decision that we as a community came together and said, we think there's a way out, a humane and lovely way for us to deal with these issues of homelessness with people who deserve healing and support. And then we have to take a big breath and say, and now we got to start over with a new process, which needs to be of the same magnitude, and that is to work with you all and work with the neighborhoods and have the same kind of conversations on a neighborhood level. The commission developed a set of criteria where they said, what would be important to have happen if we make a decision, and what's sort of the tone and the criteria for a facility. And there was a lot of talk about making it fit in the neighborhood, but now we need to talk to neighborhoods about neighborhoods' needs and concerns. The interesting thing is when we looked at a map of where facilities are located throughout the city, they're already in all of our neighborhoods. They're already all over the city, and they're already existing. So the model that we have had in our mind is the YWCA that seems to fit well into the neighborhood as far as we can tell, that's got services all on site, where it's a lovely facility, it looks good, it seems to operate well, and people are getting the treatment and the support they need for moving their lives forward in whatever way they want. We're going to need to go out and talk to neighborhoods about those of you that have facilities in your neighborhood. Are they working? What's working about them? What's not working about them? What are the needs of the neighborhoods? How can the neighborhood needs be met, perhaps, as well as folks that may be coming out of homelessness? So that's a whole nother huge venture, I think equally as daunting as one we started on with the commission, is how to have these neighborhood conversations in a productive and real way so that we understand what it is we're talking about that works best for each of the communities that exist in all of our neighborhoods. And then there's that little thing about money. There's already a joint effort between Mayor McAdams and Mayor Becker to have a legislative ask for some funding. This is a statewide issue, certainly a regional issue, and needs to be funded in that way in order to build the right kind of facilities. And along with that decision about scattered facilities, which mean they'd be smaller, they'd be targeted to audiences, and they'd be moving people quickly into housing, is having affordable housing that keeps people out of homelessness. So we need to have as big a effort on keeping people from falling into homelessness as we do helping them get out of homelessness. So I think you all may have heard about 5,000 Doors effort that the city, the Housing and Neighborhood Development Division has been working on, but the city has a very targeted approach to trying to increase our affordable housing with metrics about how many we want to get each year. I don't think I needed to. I see a lot of faces that look like they know what I'm talking about, because I think everybody knows someone who has issues around affordable housing. If it's not one of your neighbors, it's your kids, it's your friends. The housing market is not going down, it's going up, and we keep moving people onto the margins of homelessness. And our real goal would be to have people either not ever go to a shelter, they immediately get into housing or transitional housing, or spend as little time as possible in a shelter so that there's stability. Is there anything else you want me to cover, Mayor?
No, I think I'll say that I think, as Mary indicated, there's close to unanimity coming out, which is completely different than where we started. I kind of learned the hard way, I'll tell you, a few years ago, and I'm looking at Karen because we were in the meeting together in one of our quarterly meetings with our homeless providers. And I thought, oh, well, I think I know an answer here. And so I threw it out there. The next thing I know, over the next 2 weeks, I'm getting phone calls from every funder of homeless services telling me I was crazy and I better back off. And it made me, appreciate that all of us, it's just kind of like transportation, we're all experts, right? Because we see the problem and we think we know the answer. But the advantage of a process like this is that people come to common understandings and look at common information and get all their questions answered. And I think we've ended up with this scattered facilities approach that will be really successful. And we've gotten a good reception from the governor and from state legislators who we've talked to in legislative leadership. And I think we're hopeful that we'll be successful in the legislature this year to have them step forward with their portion of the needs. And of course, the city and the county and the private sector will be there as well. And then we'll have to see, as Mary indicated, we've come up with the approach we believe will work for the homeless and reduce impacts on the community, but there still will be facilities, and they will be largely in the city because of the gravity that Salt Lake City presents for virtually anything that is of regional significance, and the need to have facilities where people can get access to them, which means, in a place where there's good transportation access and some coalescing of services that aren't too far away or pretty easily accessible. So we're going to be going through that process, presumably, depending on what the new mayor and the city council decide going forward. But that's where we've ended up. Be happy to try to answer questions. I think we're anticipating, obviously this is going to depend on what a new mayor decides to do, but barring a change in direction, we're anticipating the next step will be really focusing on the specific facilities. And it's probably, we're talking at the most 3 to 5, and I think the county's thinking more like 3, and we think there may be more. We're building a new facility right now for youth. Those of you who may not be aware, but we're building a new facility in a new location for our youth that have not really had a homeless facility before. It's under construction. It'll be open in the spring. So we've already, in a way, started down that path. We just didn't know that's where we'd end up for the major part of our population.
I had a question.
Yeah.
One of the concerns that our neighbors have about the 5,000 Doors initiative is transparency around where those 5,000 doors are located. I was glad to hear you talk about metrics associated with that, and I was wondering if the mayor's office has any information around
Absolutely. We have it mapped to the facility for the city as a whole, and I assume it's available on our website with the 5,000 Doors work. Have you looked for it?
I haven't yet.
Okay. No, I've seen maps every time we update the information, and they are literally spread all across the city where we've been identifying. We thought one of the important criteria, a criterion for affordable housing is we did not want to concentrate affordable housing in one neighborhood, so that it's really spread all across the city, from Sugar House.
We have 75 in Sugar House.
Yeah. And
Or
we
planned.
we are ahead of schedule with 5,000 doors in 5 years. I think we're over the 1,000 door mark now, or very close to it, with 2,000 to 3,000 doors in process. So we're doing, I think it's proving itself well, and I'm sure the council and the new mayor will be taking a close look at that. So, but there is a map, literally, that has red dots on it that shows where all the facilities are, or the housing units that are being developed. Yeah.
Maybe directed more towards Mary. You mentioned the YWCA as a kind of a model or an example of acceptance in the neighborhood and providing the services. And I'm curious if you actually did inquiries as to why that was accepted in the neighborhood. Did it have something to do with its possible religious connections, or was there? How did you determine that it was, or it was just an opinion that it seems to be accepted in the neighborhood?
It's the very unscientific, it seems to be. It looks good, and we don't hear anyone complain about it. So it's kind of like we were at this level with the commission, and as we get closer to the ground, we need to get more information. And so I hope that that's what we do next, is go out and do some investigation around and talk to the neighbors, knock on doors, and ask people about, is it working, is it not working? Because there's a lot, it's surprising. I should have brought the map, but if you go onto the city's website under Housing and Neighborhood Development, there's a section on homeless services, and it has all the information that the commission has gone through. And when we mapped out where different facilities are, where people are getting treatment, or there's counseling, or any number of activities going on that intersect with the folks that are homeless, you'll see that they're all over the city in smaller pockets. And we assume they're working because they're there, but I don't know that if they are. So it would be really important, I think, if we could get out and talk to neighbors and literally go door to door around the facilities and learn about what works and doesn't work, because if we can learn about facilities learn from those lessons now. As another facility comes into the city, then we can hopefully deter some of those problems and enhance some of the things that work. So we have a lot to learn.
Yeah.
Yeah, Matt Nelson. At the beginning of your presentation, you said that in the discussions with the county would take the lead on the services and the city would take the lead on facilities. And then you've mentioned this distributed model of services, which certainly seems to address some of the issues. I understand that just as a reality, urban centers tend to be the magnet. You said there's a lot of gravity, and I don't know if that's historical, if that's a perception that here's where the support and services are. And I certainly appreciate that Salt Lake City is willing to take a lead on this issue, in part because it faces it. Is there support from other municipalities in the county? Because I suspect that many of those seeking services come from without, and this is, not to say, hey, I don't want to get in the finger pointing problem that, hey, just like the climate change, until X country wants to step up, we're not going to do our part. So I appreciate Salt Lake City taking the lead. Is there, if we're going to a distributed model, is there a benefit to really distributing that out even further than the city?
Yeah. The short answer is yes, and I'll give you a few sentences here. Much of the funding certainly comes from, we spend $50 million a year on homeless services. The city spends a portion of that. Obviously, it comes directly from the city. Some of it comes from federal funds that come in through the state and through the county. Some of it comes from the state. So it is distributed today. But I'll tell you that realizing as these problems were increasing and it was imposing more and more of a burden on the city's budget, 2 years ago, I'm looking at Karen again to remember exactly when, I never remember dates well, I went to the Council of Governments, which is the collection of all of the governments, local governments in the Salt Lake Valley, and launched what I describe as a campaign of shame, and pointed out to them that every municipality was represented at the homeless shelter at the road home, and that they needed to participate directly as well. Set up a quick little process, came up with a formula, and the vast majority of the cities adopted appropriations to assist with the work we're doing, and it really enhanced our work. We decided to vote the new funds, particularly to community outreach, and really started to make a big difference in our work with some of our homeless population. So yeah, the answer is yes, more needs to be done, and I think we found a willingness. The state is looking, if we're successful there, the state is looking at a large increase in dollars, both for facilities, one-time dollars, and for the request also includes services. So we're looking to broaden the financial contribution quite a bit.
One quick follow-up. Is it largely then a fiscal, is this financial issue mainly, or is there a fairly strong political component behind it, or a...
Well, actually, there are facilities. I think a lot of people don't appreciate this, but there are facilities in other part of the county. There's an overflow shelter in Midvale. Sandy City has, I think, an abuse facility for families. West Jordan or South Jordan has, I think it's West Jordan, has a facility as well. So we actually currently have facilities somewhat spread around the valley, I think more than people recognize. But that's part of what the evaluation will be going forward.
Yeah. Two things. Is the plan for the services to be centralized in Salt Lake City? And two, is there a plan other than public transportation to get those people from the distributed facilities into those services and back?
Yeah, I'm not sure on the public transportation piece, but yeah, I mean, invariably, because we're so accessible compared to most parts of the valley by transit, that this is where folks look. And for, there's some facilities that easily can move and should move, But you look like the 4th Street Clinic, which just invested close to $10 million in upgrading their facility to provide health services for a homeless population, you know, and given that they're in an easy location for the homeless to access, you know, maybe that one will not move, whereas others might, so.
I can just add a little bit to that, and that is, I think the ideal circumstance that everyone seems to agree on is that you have services where people are currently living. I mean, no one wants to leave their home and their schools and their friends and their families. Right now, our system actually requires you to come to the Rio Grande, because the only way that you can get case management and then get services is to come to Rio Grande. So one of the goals of collective impact that the county is leading is what they call no wrong door, which means wherever you go, that they can help get you into services. So the ideal would be you could go to any number of places, hopefully where you currently live, and someone could give you access to resources. And certainly the right kind of computer system helps with that. So it makes more sense to not move children out of their homes, I mean literally their communities, and away from their friends and support systems, and families as well, even if they don't have a home. So that would be something that we're certainly working towards.
You know, I hate to cut this off, but I'm realizing that we're short of time and we've got a number of things still to go through. So let me ask, if it's okay, if you've got follow-up, please, Mary, maybe you can just provide your contact information, since I don't think you're on the chopping block like the rest of us, but everybody else here, you know, is pretty close. But anyway, I think, Mary, if you can just give folks your email address, maybe that'll make sure we have some continuity here.
Karen has all my contact information.
Okay. Okay. All right. You know, this is the end of years now that we've been meeting. And I can tell you my appreciation was there from the beginning with the community councils. I started with my own neighborhood councils, the way I got involved in Salt Lake City Matters. Our staff pulled together just a number of things to remind me and us of what has been going on in each of our neighborhood councils. So I'm just going to kind of run down real quickly and mention one item in each of our community councils, all 21, of things that have been happening in these last several years. So in West Point, folks were mobilized to oppose the state prison and relocating that on the west side of Salt Lake City, and they did a masterful job there. In Jordan Meadows, a concerted effort was made to reach out to the Hispanic and Latino community, which had not been participating well, as I know is true for a number of the community councils. And they did that by translating agendas into Spanish, and in a number of the meetings had a Spanish translation as well. Rose Park was one of the first councils to embrace using neighborhood-based social networking site Nextdoor, which I think a lot of you are now using. I know is really active in my neighborhood. And made a goal of getting participation to 500 members, which would be incredible. Fair Park engaged with the state on the decision about retaining and revitalizing the State Fair Park, which is obviously ongoing. Fortunately, I think a task force recommendation from the state recommended that the Fair Park remain in place, and hopefully we'll see some more action there. I know we've been working on that from the city side quite aggressively. Poplar Grove started the Groove in the Grove, a hybrid community festival night out against crime, which was a lot of fun. Glendale was the key organizer in the 20th anniversary celebration of the popular movie The Sandlot. And it was held on site where the movie was filmed, and the backdrop was recreated for the event. Capitol Hill diplomatically facilitated discussions with neighbors on several major neighborhood projects, including the RDA, the Marmalade area, the library, traffic, and public utilities projects. The Greater Avenues is, of course, incredibly well established and continues with its newsletter to every resident and has that extremely popular street festival. The Downtown Community Council provided input and has been really heavily involved in all of our homelessness actions and discussions. Central City revamped the council website and is now keeping it up to date with current issues and interesting news. So that away there. East Central started the popular and creative Porch Fest, which is great fun. Encourage all members of the community to go. Literally has bands on all these porches and all kinds of food trucks. It's really a blast. The ballpark recently became an RDA project area to help bring more residential properties into the council boundaries. Liberty Wells successfully established the first city park dedicated to a fallen police officer, the Ron Heaps Memorial Park. Features include a monument honoring Sergeant Ron Heaps and a community garden for the residents of Liberty Wells and Lincoln Elementary students to use and enjoy. That was a long struggle and effort, so congratulations to them. ELPCO organizes and participates in the successful 9th and 9th Street Festival, which has had its 22nd year, and is an enormous amount of fun, and of course has done a lot of work around the 9th and 9th Business District and some of the changes that the neighborhood and the business area is experiencing there. Yellcrest was active in the planning and dedication of the Miller Nature Park Restoration Project. For those of you who haven't been to Miller Park, it's really this neat little gem in the city. Sugar House constantly advocated for historic preservation and the ongoing development of the Sugar House Business District and has been really active with all the issues surrounding the Sugar House streetcar. East Bench established and organized a community emergency preparedness and response program in the East Side Bench community. Wasatch Hollow assisted the city's open space staff by holding public open houses and participating in the design plan for the Wasatch Hollow restoration. Sunnyside East facilitated meetings and a neighborhood proposal for the continuing watering around the perimeter of the Bonneville Golf Course, and I thank you for that. We were in hot water, so to speak, trying to get that matter addressed, and Mike, appreciate you stepping forward there. Bonneville Hills provided effective assistance and community vision in the East Bench Master Plan update process and participated really actively in the East Bench Plan Working Group. Foothill Sunnyside re-established a community council and united with Bonneville Hills Community Council to collaborate on issues in that area. So it has been a very active time, and I think the quality of our neighborhoods and the incredible diversity of our neighborhoods has been really well served by all of you and your predecessors in this community council effort. And I didn't mention the overall kind of broad effort that we all participated in around, I think we called them NBOs, neighborhood organizations, and trying to work through changes that reflected current circumstances in policy with the city council, where we had diverged just out of passage of time enormously from the way neighborhood councils functioned compared to what the policy said. So anyway, I thank you all for this incredible work you've done and continue to do, and I know we'll continue to do, and encourage you to continue to be, you know, what the policy said. So anyway, I thank you all for this incredible work you've done and continue to do, and I know we'll continue to do, and encourage you to continue to do, and encourage you to continue to be, you know, what the policy said. So anyway, I thank you all for this incredible work you've done and continue to do, and encourage you to continue to be as or even more active in your efforts and to encourage more and more people to get involved. I know with some community councils that there are people who have been laboring at the oar of neighborhood participation relentlessly for year after year after year, and it makes it a challenge, I think, to be able to both bring in new blood and new ideas, and to give the people who work so hard for their neighborhoods a break in the work that they do. So anyway, I appreciate our staff pulling all of this together, and it's a great reminder of the work that everybody does, and maybe hopefully inspires a lot more work and effort in the future as our community councils continue to thrive. So with that, maybe I can just open this up in our remaining time, as we usually do, for anything you want to talk about in terms of things happening in your neighborhood or things you want to share relating to the neighborhood work we do in the city. Laura.
I'd just like to say how much we appreciate your support of the community councils and the staff. Without that, we wouldn't be able to do anything other than complain. It wouldn't be a positive experience. But thank you so much for your leadership and support.
Yeah, well, thanks. Well, thank you. Karen and I were visiting in getting ready for this, for our gathering today, and reminded me, and some of you around the table, that when I started in office, there were some really uncomfortable times, and splits within community councils, and splits of community councils, and splits between some community councils in the city. And I think really over time we've managed to work through those kinds of issues, and are back, I think, hopefully to focusing on sort of the constructive work we can do to help our neighborhoods and city be successful. So thank you. Yeah.
I would, with the Liberty Wells Community Council, like to thank you and your staff for all of the support that you have given us through, the St. Joseph's Villa, and keeping that footprint where it is so that we have our neighborhood still intact. And of course, as you mentioned, Ron Heap's Memorial Park and Garden, that was a long, difficult journey, but it has come to pass, and we're glad for that. So we just want to tell you you'll be great at your next endeavor, and we really appreciate you and your staff and all of your help.
Thank you. We really weren't planning on this as sort of a congratulatory deal. But anything else in terms of things going on? I'm sure you'll want to meet as soon as possible with the incoming mayor and her staff as she assembles that and gets her her department leadership in place and organized. And she's she's certainly indicated in the course of the campaign she's really committed to listening to what people are saying in the community, and hopefully she'll be a good ear for things you bring to her as well. Yeah.
Has there been any word about whether this type of meeting will continue in the new administration that you guys have heard, or are we just going to wait and see?
Needless to say, I haven't been consulted on that. So I really don't know. It's something obviously that started before I came into office, and we did some restructuring. I think that we felt would be helpful in terms of providing good input and participation in the city. But you'll have to consult with Jackie as she gets into office, or before. I mean, transition is a good time if you can find your way into into those discussions. Oh, yeah, I'm being reminded.
Yes. So real quick, we do have some outgoing chairs that we wanted to recognize. And if we could have you come up, we'll take some pictures with the mayor. And Mike Ely, who is with our Sunnyside East Community Council. And then there is Andrew Johnston and Aaron Youngberg. So if you'd like to come up, we have a certificate for you, and we'll have a picture with the mayor.
Okay.
If we could get a...
All right. Yeah, thanks. Hey, we also need, I mean, every one of these meetings we've had, our staff has pulled together some food. I'm sure they've provided their own personal money to get all the food here. Now, I know that's not the case, but anyway, they've always done a great job in preparing for and making these nice events rather than just, standard meetings. So, and appreciate all of you taking time. You've all taken, you take a lot of time just to devote to your community councils, but to take time in the middle of your days. These started out as morning meetings, and I appreciate people were willing to move these to the middle of the day. I think it's been great you've been able to spend time in the middle of the day and join us. All right, well, thanks. We'll do these photos, and I wish you all well. And as I said, hope you're all, as active or more active going forward. It's what makes this city so incredible. Having neighborhoods that are so distinct that reflect this tradition going all the way back to the settling of this valley, literally, whether that's the downtown or the first neighborhood in Capitol Hill or the second one in the avenues, or we can go on and on. But and having our city so compact compared to most cities is really unique for a U.S. city. And I commend all of you for being so dedicated to your neighborhoods so that the quality of the neighborhoods the quality is preserved. And there's huge fights around that. That will not end. And that's healthy because part of what happens is conditions change and circumstances change, and neighborhoods have to adapt while preserving the qualities that make them unique and special. So anyway, thank you all for the great work you do, and I'm sure you'll keep it up.